Thank you so much for listening to this podcast and giving your time to Urbanistica podcast, Cities for People. Well, in this episode, as you see the title, as you read the title, how to be a great podcast guest. And actually this question was one of the many questions that I got yesterday, and I'm thinking to record like an entire episode to answer this question because it's like super important and super good question. So like my answer gonna be based on my experience after interviewing 350 people from different countries, cultures, background, genders, and I made some recommendations, but also it is from me analyzing like the Urbanistica podcast episode. I checked like the most popular episode, how many people listen to it, and try to analyze them, why people listen to these people, and also like the podcast episode that not so many people listen to it, and try to figure out why people didn't listen to these people. As I mentioned, my recommendation, they're not like perfect, but they are based on my like experience with doing interviews, and also based on statistic and numbers from Urbanistica podcast. So I divided the recommendation to 3 different categories. The first one is pre-recording, the second one is during the recording, and the third one is post-recording. So let's start with the first category, pre-recording, and it's about everything related to the pre-recording. When I send you the invitation, the calendar booking, the questions, everything before we start, click on record button. So in this phase, my recommendation to you, first, like listen to the previous podcast episode. You don't need to listen to all 300 episodes, but like pick 1 or 2 and listen. You don't need also to listen to the entire episode if you don't have time. I know all of us busy, but it's good if you listen to, so just like get the feeling of Urbanistica podcast, like the atmosphere, the way the questions, how people react, and so on. So you just like get the vibes of Urbanistica podcast, because this will like helps you to formulate your answers, like to feel more comfortable. So my first recommendation to you is that tune in to Urbanistica podcast and try to spend some time to listen to the previous episode. And the second recommendation is that you should really read through every single question when I send you the questions. All the questions are important. The one in the beginning about yourself, the one about the project, the one about reflections, about hobbies, self-leadership, and so on. So it's important that you read through the questions, so also you prepare an answer, because you're gonna sound much more better when we do the interview if you're prepared, compared to like a guest who didn't prepare, and when I ask the question they'd be like and also some of them told me like can you please cut because I didn't prepare. And then like we lose a lot of storytelling, we lose a lot of we lose a lot of fun if you don't prepare, and then we do the recording, and then you be like, no, it's not, like I'm not ready to answer this. So prepare. And let's say you read the questions, you prepared, and my recommendation to you is that never write your entire answer on your laptop or paper and so on, because this is not good. I will explain later why it's not good. But what you can try to do, instead of writing the entire answer, write like a bullet points of information, statistic, name of architects, name of cities or companies, partners, and information that you might forget later when we get into this podcast atmosphere. So never write the entire answer, just write bullet points that you should remember. And I will explain later why it's not good that you write your entire answer. By the way, I never ask my guests to send me the answers. I don't want to hear the answers through email. I love to hear it from you, IRL, when we do the conversation live. So never send me an answer. I don't want to hear the answers by email. I love to wait until I see you and hear your answers. So for the first category, like the pre-recording, so listen to the previous podcast episodes, invest some time to listen to the other episodes, other guests, and then prepare your questions. Never write the entire answer, just write the bullet points of information that you shouldn't miss and you should remember. And that's it. So these are my recommendation for you, like for the pre-recording phase. So let's move to the second category or phase, and it's about during the recording, and it's super important here as well. And the first thing that you should really, do is that you should show up in time. So when I send you like the calendar booking and I say we start this time, usually I book 2 hours, and I think this is enough to do to have a good storytelling about the topic. So I'm expecting you to show up in time, and I will be very grateful that if you will be there even like, 5 minutes before. So we start on time. And before we start record, it's important that you bring your water, you bring your coffee, you go to bathroom so you feel comfortable, so we don't interrupt the podcast or the storytelling flow later. It's important that you have everything prepared, so when we start record, we don't interrupt the storytelling. Of course, the podcast is not live, and I can pause whenever you want, and I can do editing later. But it's always better if we have everything prepared, so when we have the flow, we don't cut the flow. So prepare, bring your water, coffee, put your paper on the table, put your phone on silent, and go to the bathroom and everything, so you are ready to tell your story. If we are doing this on Zoom, so also prepare everything and then be there and smile to the camera. When we record online on Zoom, I really ask you to use a headset. Never ever use the inbuilt microphone on your laptop, because it sucks no matter which laptop you have, but usually it's very bad audio quality. And still the same thing with the AirPods or headphones, yes. And usually the voice quality is not good, and you can even go back and listen to the previous podcast on Urbanistica podcast. You can really clear hear the voice is not good, the quality of the sound is not good. And according to the statistic, even the guest is the most famous architect or planner, and the story is super interesting, the project is super interesting. But if the voice if the sound quality is not good, not so many people listen to it. And this makes me sad, because we spend a lot of time on preparation, and then the guest told me I don't have a headset, can we do it just with this, with the inbuilt microphone or with the AirPods? And then the audio quality is not good, and then there are not so many listeners. So you just we lose the entire point of the podcast. So please, if we do it on Zoom, use a headset. When we start the recording, so me as a host will be in charge of time management, following up the question and structure and so on. So you don't really need to think about how much time we have left, and also are we following the questions or not, and so on. Because it's my responsibility as a podcast host, and your responsibility as a podcast guest is to share your story. And in my podcast, it's not the 15-minute podcast. It's 2 hours or more. So you have really you have so much time to answer as long as you want. So when you prepare the answers, or when you think about the answers, and when you answer actually during the recording, you don't need to give me a super short answer. We have time. I plan 2 hours, so we have really plenty of time for you to tell your story. And if in case you're gonna give me a super short answer, I will tell you, can you elaborate more, or can you tell me more? So in the end, you're gonna tell me the proper answer, the long answer. This is for you when you prepare. Don't prepare super short answers. Prepare the answer that you think it's enough. Have the information that your listeners should listen to and should learn and get inspired by. So don't think about time. I will manage the time, and usually we are always doing good. And when you answer here, you shouldn't read your answers from the screen. Remember, I told you in the previous category, never write the entire answer, because this is super bad for storytelling. When we start, Urbanistica is about having a conversation. It's not only one way of information. So this kind of reading answers from the screen is not really working good, because then you program your mind that your answer is there, and when you start reading, and suddenly maybe I ask something else, and then I notice that in many podcast episodes that the guest reading from the screen, and when I suddenly ask another question, they be okay, I didn't prepare for that. Can we cut this? Then the story is not really good enough. And also maybe I changed the way change the question, not the entire question, but the way how I ask. And then maybe the answer that you wrote on the screen is not really answering the same question that I asked during the conversation. And it's also like based on statistic, people don't listen to the guest who's reading from the screen, because obviously you can notice that this is a robot. The guest is reading and it's like sound like a machine, and it's not really this conversation atmosphere. So people stop listening to you if you're reading from the screen. So my recommendation was that you should just write like bullet points, put them on paper on screen, and let's have a conversation. And in case you forget something, you can always open your screen or read from paper and remember and answer. So it's always good that you don't read from the screen and just like answer. And I know like sometimes it's tough for, especially for people working in municipalities, because they always, or not always, but the people I interviewed, they want to say exactly the same vision that's written on the homepage or in their documents, the same guide, the same political way, like the same agenda. So they don't want to mess up with one or two words. So usually what they do is that they write the entire answer, and they always read from the screen. So not all of them, of course. I need to be careful, and also I want you to be careful with what I'm telling. Not the all people from working in the municipalities, but some of them, what I noticed during my interviews, they reading from the screen. And when I ask them like, why you reading? Like, come on, this is your job, you know that, no? And they tell me, no, I have to be careful. I need to listen to it after, so I don't say other stuff, it's like a big mission. And I understand that, but in the end, I mean, like, you work there, it's your job. Okay, I understand that maybe you read 1 or 3 or 4 lines, but not the entire episode. So also like checking the statistic, when people read from screen, they don't have so many listeners compared to people telling the story from their heart and not really reading from the screen. They have so many listeners. And this takes me to my next recommendation, which is about be yourself. I always tell this to my listeners, to my guests, to myself as well. And the first step, I tell it to myself, don't be a copy of somebody else, be an original copy of yourself. So don't pretend to be like a famous and super well-known and a perfect architect when you answer and the way you talk, because also it's super easy for us to see that you're faking this. So what my recommendation to you is just be yourself. Don't pretend to be somebody else. Don't pretend to be perfect. Just be yourself, because people, believe me, like me, the host. The statistic, the numbers shows that if you're yourself, people will love you, people will listen to you. And the most popular episode on Urbanistica podcast is about the guest being like themselves, really, like, and also like they're being so personal. So this is what we really appreciate as a listeners from you as a guest, is that you just be yourself. Don't be perfect, don't read from the screen, don't be a robot. Because we will see this is like you're fake and we will not listen to you, because like we are tired of this perfection and a beautiful world, sustainable cities and green cities and all these visions and so on. We want like to hear a story, and stories about you, a storyteller, and about your character. You are unique in your way, you are unique in your project. So please just be yourself, and believe me, if you're yourself, you will get so many listeners, which means that you will inspire so many people, and you will have like big possibilities that people will listen to you and do what you tell, what you recommend them in your projects, and make better cities, basically. How to say, for me, this is the main point, is that you are being yourself as a guest, and like be personal. Of course, there is a line, you can draw the line, like how much you tell of your personal life or personal experience, but it's always good that you being like a human being and being personal and tell a story from your perspective, not from really like municipality or studio, but also from your, because this is, for me, this is important. And this is what makes Urbanistica podcast unique. We are not only talking about projects and organization and so on. For me, it's important to talk about you as a person. In the end, we are people, and we are building cities for people as well. So let's not only talk about cities. In this podcast, we also talk about you, and we really appreciate to hear from you, to hear about you. So we also develop ourselves, like personal development is very super important. Yeah, and like don't be afraid. In the end, the podcast is not live. I record, I do the editing, I cut. So also in case like you feel that, okay, you told something maybe you shouldn't tell, you can always tell me like, Mustafa, can you cut this? Can you cut this? And of course I will do that. So don't worry, it's not live. Yeah, let's just be ourselves, and that's it. And one more important recommendation is that don't sell hard, which means that don't promote so much of your company. I know like this is an important moment for you to do the marketing, to talk about the company as well, because we have so many listeners and so on, which is great. But again, if you see the statistic, a guest who was like promoting a lot the company, people didn't like the episode so much. They didn't continue to listen because it was about selling. So my recommendation to you, if you really want to sell your company or the organization, the way you can do it is like this. Talk about the project, talk about the culture of the company, talk about like your team members, the process, how your design thinking or your process in doing projects, the values. That's how people will understand like what type of organization you belong to and what kind of value you deliver and so on. So in case you want like to sell, you do it by talking about the process, about the journey, telling a story about the people, the values and so on. And that's like a really popular way to sell your organization and to market it. Also, the numbers show like many guests, they talk about like, yes, in my team we have this, and our design process is like this. We go back and we have so many challenges. Like they're super honest and really sharing like honestly the story from the company, from the studio, without putting any, in Arabic we say spices, like when you like over telling or faking things up. So, and make them sound so beautiful, but it's not real. So like when they tell the true story about the process, the journey, the people, then it's like people will really get the value of the company that you work with or you work at. So like my point here is that don't sell hard. And let's say like, yes, we finished, it went really good. And I'm grateful that you give your time to record the podcast with me. And I really appreciate if you do like a podcast or a podcast. I really appreciate if you do a social media post. What I mean by that is that when we are done, just take a picture and then post it on your social media or on LinkedIn, and just write like, we just recorded an episode on Urbanistica podcast and we talk about this. Stay tuned. The episode will be online in 3 weeks or 2 weeks or tomorrow. Depends on when I will publish it. So why I'm telling this, because like, first of all, I really appreciate, because then you will like spread Urbanistica podcast on your social media, which is great for me. The second is that you will generate like engagement in your network. So when people will read your post, they like will do a comment, and also they will be looking forward to listen to you. So you're already building a kind of story on your story. Like people will start waiting for your story. And when I publish it, you share it and people listen to you. So you build a kind of engagement. And also this sharing on social media, this will help you to get traffic to your profile. There is a chance that they will not only read about the post about Urbanistica, but also like they will see your profile, see what you're doing, read about other projects and connect with you. And what I noticed, like not all of the guests doing this, like sharing after we record the podcast, like from this phase. But the people who did it, they got a lot of likes and comments and engagement. So it's also good for them. So I really appreciate, and this is my recommendation to you, because then you will build a story and you will generate more engagement and traffic to your profile, that you do a social media post directly after we recorded the episode. So let's summarize the recommendation for this phase. Like during the recording phase, show up in time. Bring your water, coffee, go to bathroom, use a headset if you're doing it on Zoom. Take your time to answer. Be yourself, be personal, never read from screen. Mustafa will lead the conversation and take care of time management and all of this stuff. Don't sell hard. Just talk about the process, the challenges, the people on the team and so on, and do a social media post. So let's move to the last phase, or last category, post-recording category. And here is like when I do the editing and so on. Usually people ask me if they can listen to their to the audio before I publish it. And what I say no, don't listen to that, and I don't want to send it because also many of us, they don't like them how they sound, their voice, and it's very common. Like it's very common. They say, "Oh, I sound so awful. I don't want to listen to myself," and then they start to be stressed. And please, can you cut this? I sound so bad here, and so on. So usually I don't send the audio to you after we record, because then you will get into this bubble that I sound so bad and my voice is not good. It's not like a radio voice and so on. But that's very fine. I mean, like, I know, like, all of us experiencing this, and believe me, you sound so good. Your story is so good, and I will make sure that your story is clear for the listeners and so on. So don't worry about this. This is my first recommendation. Don't worry about the way you sound, about your story and so on. Because if your story was not clear, it's also one of my responsibility. If your story was not clear, I will ask you during the recording, like, can you elaborate more? Can you tell me about this? So I understand the story, because I'm representing the listeners here, and your story should be clear to me as well as a host. So don't worry at all. And then when I send you the links, so please, again, publish the episode on your profile and invite your network to listen to it. Maybe not all of them will listen to podcasts, because not all of us are podcast people. Of course, you're podcast people because you're here, maybe. But publish it and write about, like, what did you talk about? Because this will generate also engagement. And believe me, like, many of the guests who published their episode on their profile, they got many listeners. This is the first. So you have more possibilities to reach out to more audience, because of, like, you share it on your network, and also, like, your network, they loves you, so they will listen to your episode, and maybe they will share it as well. So your word will reach out to so many people, and that's how you can also, like, reach your goal, is by, like, inspiring them and sharing your story with them. And this is the first one. The second, like, goal, or the second, like, the reward, people will reach out to you after they listen to you, or after they see you publishing this podcast and telling that I'm talking about green cities. So they will text you. I got so many nice comments from people I did interviews with, and they told me that, yes, I got a request from this newspaper to do an interview. I got request from this studio to collaborate. I got request from a student to be like a thesis advisor, or advisor, and so on. So you generate a collaboration. This is also, like, the biggest goal of this, that we do something tangible after our conversation. So sharing on social media will help you a lot to get traffic, to get more listeners, to get more collaborations, projects, and so on. So these are my recommendations to you in this phase, in the post-recording phase. You shouldn't really worry. I will take care of the sound and editing and so on, and the story, and then publish on your social media. And that's it. So thanks again, like, for giving your time to listen to the podcast. I really wish that you got inspired by this episode, and think about these points when you, like, when you're a guest on Urbanistica podcast or on another podcast. These are interesting points that you maybe think about before you go and do the recording, because this will help you a lot to spread your words, to make an impact on this planet, to reach out to so many people, and also to do more collaboration to make a better series. Again, thank you so much for listening, and I'm happy to hear from you what you think about the episode, and share it on your social media. And don't forget, send me nominations about people you think they are super interesting for the podcast. They have interesting story, and also send me feedback. I will be grateful. So in the end, keep up the good work and keep loving cities.